ready. Good afternoon to everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 5th Knowledge Exchange Workshop of the BioRural project. The focus of this workshop is bioenergy. This and all sessions of this workshop will be recorded. The workshop will consist of 3 sessions, each one of them lasting about 1 hour and 15 minutes, in each session we'll have 4 or 5 talks of 15 minutes each. At the end of the session, an additional period of 15 minutes will be provided for questions, answers, or discussion. The presentations of the first day will focus on basic concepts, and that's the list of the talks for today. And on the second day, the focus will be shifted to showcasing good practices, and the list of the talks for tomorrow is these ones. And finally, on Thursday, the last day of this workshop, we will be covering the cost-cutting themes, and the list of the talks for that day is this one. This workshop is a joint organization of CERT and the University of Coimbra. Thank you, Dimitris, Michalis, and João for good work in the organization of this workshop. The CERT, the Center for Research and Technology, HELLAS, from Greece, is an institution founded in the year 2000, and it is a non-profit private entity. It has more than 1,500 workers and an annual turnover bigger than 50 million euros. The mission of CERT involves both basic and applied research in a deep collaboration with industry. CERT is divided in 5 institutions associated with 5 different research areas: information and communication technologies, sustainable mobility and transport networks, agriculture technology and biosystems engineering, applied life sciences, sustainable process and energy research. The institution at the University of Coimbra that is associated to this organization is named by historical reasons ADAI. The main research areas of ADAI, which stands for Association for the Development of Industrial Aerodynamics, the main research areas of ADAI are the sustainability of the built environment, forest fires, the specific subject of energetic materials and photonics, industrial ecology, and energy systems. Within this last area, we have a strong and fruitful collaboration with a company called Sivan, which is a spin-off from University of Coimbra. And this collaboration targets the development of mini-scale biomass-fueled ORC base, which means organic Rankine cycle base, combined heat and power systems. Thank you also to the colleagues from the University of Ljubljana, Luca, Matej, and Mia, for all the support in organizing these workshop series. Let me now speak a little bit about the BioRural project, just an overview. The title of this project is Accelerating Circular Bio-Based Solutions Integration in European rural areas. The BioRural project is a coordination support type project, and its core idea is to facilitate the transition of knowledge into technology. So we want to transform the knowledge into technology, and after disseminate this technology among the end users to address their problems. The project involves 19 partners from 14 countries, and the countries are grouped in for regional areas. The primary goal of BioRural project is to promote small-scale bio-based solutions in rural areas to support the transition from a linear to circular economy system. And to achieve this goal, we will evaluate the current state of the bioeconomy, create an European rural bioeconomy network, assess and promote bio-based solutions in rural areas by facilitating knowledge exchange and capacity building workshops as this one, identify factors affecting the adoption of innovation and the diffusion of bio-based solutions, develop, optimize, and maintain an online toolkit open to stakeholders. We call to this toolkit the BioRural Toolkit, create and develop blueprints for bioeconomy businesses. And what can be found in the BioRural Toolkit? We can find there fact sheets on the current state of bioeconomy, relevant and select scientific works, commercial bio-based solutions and funding opportunities, success stories with audiovisual material, recording of knowledge exchange workshops, rural development blueprints, opportunities for open discussions, policy and research guidelines. And for more information, please visit the link provided below or visit us in the following social media platforms. So it is now my pleasure to introduce you with the first speaker of today's session. And the first speaker of the session is Manolis Karampinis. Manolis is Director of the Department of Bioenergy Europe since 2022. Among other, his duties include the management of the European Pellet Council. Manolis has more than 15 years of experience in bioenergy sector as a researcher associate at the Center of Research and Technology, HELAS, the CERT. Manolis has a degree in chemical engineer, a Master of Science in Energy Generation and Management, and a Master of Science, another one, in Economic Systems, all of them from the National Technical University of Athens. Manolis, it's a pleasure to have you with us. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Jose, for the introduction, and thanks to all the BioRural Consortium for inviting me to speak in this webinar. Let me try and share the screen. And please let me know if you see it now in presentation mode. Can you confirm?
Yes, in presentation mode is good.
Perfect, fantastic. So I was assigned to speak about bioenergy in the EU context. It's a quite broad topic, and bioenergy is a complex subject. So I can only go into a quite top-level approach, not going into all the details. But I think you have a very full program over the next 3 days. So I think many of them will elaborate on some things I will only touch upon briefly in this presentation. Before I begin, I will have to say some things about BioEnergy Europe. BioEnergy Europe is a trade association. We are based in Brussels. We represent the bioenergy sector in the European institutions since 1990. We are a members-based organization. We have around 180 members, of which 40 are national biomass associations, primarily from Europe, and around 140 companies and a few academic partners, which represent all the steps on the bioenergy value chains, from production of fuels to trading to conversion into final energy products, equipment providers, consultancies, and so forth. We are hosting indeed the European Pellet Council, a network of the national pellet associations in Europe. We are involved in 2 certification schemes. EN Plus is the world-leading scheme for quality certification of wood pellets for the residential sector, what we call the premium pellet sector. And SURE is a newer certification scheme which has to do with sustainability certification of biomass according to the requirements of the Renewable Energy Directive. I will say some things about that at the end of my presentation. And what we are doing as an organization, we are of course active in monitoring and influence EU legislation that is affecting the bioenergy sector, and it's quite a lot actually. We are active in monitoring market data and statistics about the bioenergy sector, and like every association to facilitate networking, promote visibility for our members, and so forth. So, going into, let's say, the core topic of my presentation, first, I think it's important to frame the discussion in the proper context. So often, especially when you're talking to non-specialists, there is an equation made in someone's mind that energy equals electricity. And that is far from the case. If you look at the EU energy system, electricity currently represents about 25% of the consumption. Our other 26 something percent is energy used for the transportation sector, but almost half of the energy that we're using today is actually used for heating, and that includes space heating, but also heating for industrial processes. So when we are discussing, let's say, politically that we are going to electrify everything, we are talking about the remaining 75% more or less of the current electricity consumption. And that's a huge challenge for the future if we assume that we're going to go down this path. Looking into more details now about what type of energy sources we have in each of these pie segments, it's important to note that bioenergy is pretty much everywhere. Bioenergy is the major contributor of renewable energy sources in the heating and cooling sector, and that's why we'll be speaking mostly in my presentation for heating, actually. But bioenergy is also there in the electricity sector with about 6% of the total production. But also, it's, I would say at the moment, maybe the only meaningful contributor of renewable energy in the transport sector with biofuels. So in short, bioenergy is pretty much everywhere in the renewable energy system, in the European energy system. I promise I will speak a bit more about bioheat because this is where bioenergy is mostly consumed. And if you look at our statistics that we publish every year, around half of the bioheat consumption in Europe concerns the residential sector. So this is, let's say, individual appliances at household level. About 20% is derived heat. Derived heat means district heating. So in many district heating networks, there is a significant biomass consumption. Some of them are, I would say, fully decarbonized now using biomass. About 25% of bioenergy is used for the industrial sector. And then you have smaller shares in, for example, the commercial and service sector or in the agricultural sector, for example, for heating of greenhouses, which I think is our case is relevant for the context of the BioRural project. I have on the right a better elaboration of what bioenergy use in the bioheat use, in the industrial sector actually means at the moment. So if you look at where bioheat is used, it's not surprising maybe that most of the industries that are using bioenergy are actually ones that produce residues because they handle some kind of biogenic material. They have access to biomass resources. They have own production of residues, so they use them in-house to cover part of their energy demand. And that are industries such as the paper and the pulp sector, the wood processing sector, but also the food and beverage sector is a sector that is using a lot of their own residues for biomass for production. Sorry. And interesting also to note here is that there are other industrial sectors in Europe. You see here the small slice in the metallic minerals, that is primarily cement production, which use primarily biogenic waste. But the interest in the future is that we expect that this segment will grow because many industries need to decarbonize from the so-called hard-to-abate sectors, and biomass represents at the moment a cost-effective and mature technological solution for them. So we already seeing movements in the production of lime, for example, or even in the steel production using biomass. All right. I think some of the speakers will go into more details about the technologies. So this is very quick summary from my side. When we're talking about sorry, modern bioenergy technologies, we are talking about automatic solutions now, not manual feeding, for example. We are talking about a cheap, renewable fuel, and we're talking about operation on demand. So that's a key difference between bioenergy, also in the electricity production and other renewable energy technologies. It's a dispatchable energy source, meaning that if you have access to the fuel, you can produce energy on demand. It's not the case like wind and solar when you are relying on the weather conditions, for example. And for the technologies, we can have from small thing like a little cozy pellet stove you can have in your living room and you can see the fire and feel relaxed, to bigger size, for example, domestic boilers, which are at the moment, I would say, almost zero emissions. The amount of particle emissions that come out from these boilers is really very small at the moment, smaller, I would say, than the standard oil boilers even. Then you have medium-scale boilers, things you might find in a school, in a hospital, in some smaller industries or small district heating networks. And these are very much connected with the rural economy. You often find them in the rural setting, often using locally available biomass resources, but sometimes they can have components, fuel that is like pellet fuel that is traded over longer distances. And then finally, you have industrial scale boilers, which are in the multi-megawatt size. And there you can have production of high temperature steam, for example, or high temperature flue gases. You can have heat for larger district heating networks, but also you can have combined heat and power, CHP, in a sense. Going to a big discussion about the biomass supply would probably take up too much time from this presentation. But just to give you a quick overview of where we are at the moment, if you look at, again, the statistics, about 70% of the biomass that we are consuming is solid biomass, and most of it is actually coming from forest biomass, from different assortments, either directly, sometimes from the forest, for example, fuel wood, but also a lot of forest residues, residues from the wood processing sectors, and so forth. And then you have smaller shares of agricultural biomass, and here we have a huge potential to further expand and increase the use of biomass used in Europe and all over the world, actually. And a smaller part is also biomass contained in waste. There is a huge discussion about the fact that the biomass supply is restrained and that we should not be expecting huge increases, let's say, in the biomass supply in Europe. As I said, this is a very complicated discussion. We cannot go into all the details now, but just to give you some food for thought, here I share a couple of pictures that showcase in a very, I would say, dramatic way possibilities to further expand biomass supply. So on the top left, you see a picture from Ukraine, and these are not the Russians. These are these are reed fires in Kherson, where local people burn the reeds just to get rid of them. Same concept in a different area, in the photo on the bottom left, in an olive grove in central Greece, where the farmers, after they prune the trees, they just collect the piles and they burn them in open fires, the white columns of smoke you can see, just to dispose them quickly and in an easy way, without any source of energy recovery, and yeah, with a local air pollution generated. And finally, on the right side, a picture from last year's wildfires in Greece. Similar, I think, pictures are quite familiar to most people who are living in Mediterranean countries, where a lot of forests are destroyed within a matter of days. And just to recap a bit my point, yes, biomass is a finite resource, but it's definitely not scarce. This is something that some of our members are saying, and I quite like the argument. And I have two rhetorical questions here for your consideration. Is it better to leave biomass to burn in wildfires or in field fires or in modern combustion systems? And the second rhetorical question, that's a bit more elaborate, is we often hear that bioenergy is a low value solution. And to some extent, I would agree. Bioenergy has to be to some low value. It's a fundamental of the economic system that we are operating in. However, are there other valorization pathways at the moment that can process huge volumes of biomass that can come from sustainable forest management or from wildfire prevention and correct agronomic practices, or is it only bioenergy that can handle this in a meaningful way? I have two more arguments regarding the bioenergy role in the European energy system. The first is about energy independence. We know that Europe is a continent that relies on energy inputs. We rely a lot on petroleum, for example, on natural gas. The consequences of natural gas dependence on Russia were outlined dramatically, or perhaps not so dramatically, considering the final outcome since 2022. And also to some extent, the coal that we are still using is also imported to a large extent. But if you look, let's say, at biomass, yes, we import biomass primarily in the form of pellets for specific cases and for large end users with other kinds of requirements. But while fulfilling 12% of our energy demand, only 1%, let's say, of the energy, total energy inputs on energy basis is actually biomass. And with biomass, we are only 5% dependent on imports, and these are coming, I would say, from trusted partners like the US and Canada, primarily. So there is also an argument here in terms of energy independence for the bioenergy sector. Another argument is about the EU industry leadership. This is something that's an exercise that we did fairly recently, even though the data behind it are somewhat old. When there was a discussion in Europe about the Net Zero Industry Act, we used global suppliers of bioenergy technology providers from the well-known trade publication Bioenergy International, and we calculated that around 70% of these are actually coming from Europe. So when we're talking about promoting bioenergy use in Europe, we should not be forgetting that we are promoting European technologies in which we have an expertise and a leadership, unlike perhaps some other components. When it comes to the role of bioenergy in the future, another very big discussion. Here I'm presenting a graph from IRENA. It's the publication they released last year about their suggested pathway to 1.5 Celsius degrees for the future. And you can see the situation in 2022 and 2050 globally. So what happens is that when you focus on bioenergy, we expect that bioenergy role is expected to increase both in absolute terms, if you do the calculations, but also as in relative importance. So from around 11% in 2020, it will go to 60% in 2050. And if you look at the details, this is even higher, for example, than hydrogen, which is a sector for which we talk about a lot, and rightly so. But yeah, the future contribution is expected to be much more. A key in the transition here is the shifting also from the traditional uses of biomass, especially in underdeveloped countries, to modern biomass uses. That is something that we often think this is not relevant for Europe, but this is not the case. If you look at the details, there is a lot of biomass use taking place in Europe in older and inefficient appliances, while we could have much better results, both in terms of efficiency, utilization of resources, and emissions, if we convert these appliances to, for example, modern biomass boilers. And one of the last points I have to make is about bioenergy and EU legislation. And here I have two memes for you, just to keep the discussion a bit more lively. One thing that we often hear in discussion is that bioenergy is not sustainable. We often like to turn this argument the other way around, and we have to make the claim, and it is true, that bioenergy is the only renewable energy source sustainability criteria. This was enshrined in the Renewable Energy Directive 2018 for solid and gaseous biomass, even earlier for liquid biomass fuels. So this is something that the sector, I would say, was even embracing. An issue that is coming usually from the EU legislation is that it sometimes feels for project developers too much. So if you're thinking of developing a bioenergy project, Then you start digging into the details, and then you come into all kinds of acronyms that to a layperson might not say much. RED 2, RED 3, MCP, this is the Medium Combustion Plant Directive, EUDR is the European Deforestation Regulation, just some files that we are active on from time to time or now. And that makes it a bit complicated to get oriented around. The point I would like to make here is that it's not the fact that the sector is regulated that is the issue per se. It's the fact that often the changes in the legislation are quite frequent without investigating, let's say, what was the situation in the previous framework. This is a typical case, for example, the sustainability discussion. We had a sustainability criteria in 2018, and we adopted new ones in 2023 without some member states actually implementing the first ones and then seeing how they were even implemented. And of course, the public debate that goes with it is also sometimes poisoning the discussion on bioenergy, because this is conducted on sentimental arguments and not considering proper facts about, for example, forest management. To wrap up this presentation, you might be aware, I hope you're aware, that we have European elections coming up in June. So as an association, we published recently our manifesto in which we outline 3 steps for the energy transition and for the role of bioenergy in it. The first point that we make is that we have to have a clear fossil fuel exit strategy in Europe. This is not the case at the moment. The second is that we should highlight the sustainable and efficient bioenergy use that enhances energy security. And the third point, something for which I did not have time to talk about today, is the role of bioenergy in generating carbon removals or negative emissions, if you want, engineered permanent carbon removals. We're talking about technologies such as bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, or biochar, something which may be more relevant again in the BioRural framework, which I understand is focused mostly on smaller scale applications. Yeah, so this is also quite important. I hope I did not bore you, and I hope I did not go into a lot of details. So many thanks for your attention.